Hi there, Kiro here. So in this video I'll be showing you my deck list for Prehistory Collection Premium Cecilia Reverse, one of my favorite decks to play right now in Premium for casual play. With the somewhat recent ban list update that unbanned Katrina, a lot of people have been finding some success with playing Neo-Nectar in Premium since it's finally playable again. So I see a lot of these pure Katrina builds find success in tournaments. They primarily run plant token aggro with Ines as the main ride target. So this deck sort of builds upon the foundation of a plant token aggro, but it follows up its stride turns with a rewrite combo from Cecilia Reverse, which gives you massive pluses from the additional drive checks that it gets. I'm pretty sure that this deck is a lot less consistent compared to pure Katrina builds, but I find this deck to be so much fun to play casually. So I'll be going through the deck build, and I'll also be going over my card choices and ratios since I don't often see people run the same cards that I play in this deck. Let's start off with the Great Tree lineup. My Great Tree lineup actually completely revolves around the Cecilia Reverse combo. So obviously we're going to be starting with 4 of the Thornlily Musketeer Cecilia Reverse. This is your main deck boss unit. Your primary combo revolves around this unit. In your Katrina turns, what this card gives to you is that you get 1 additional Vanguard swing and 2 more Rearguard swings. And what I love about this card's rewrite is that it does not minus you at all, which means if you resolve this combo successfully, you will get a total of 5 drive checks that turn at least, which gives you a very healthy hand size going into your opponent's turn. 2 things to note about this card. First, the rewrite is not once per turn, which means that if you get lucky and you get another Cecilia through this Cecilia Reverse's on-attack ability, you get another set of 1 Vanguard swing and 2 Rearguard swings. But this happens very rarely, so unless you really think you can pull it off, be careful not to become tunnel visioned into doing this extra combo. And second thing to note is that although this deck wants to primarily revolve around this card, the condition for the rewrite is pretty tough to meet because you need 2 standing Rearguards to lock, and if you want to rewrite this card, you want to lock the front row as well. Luckily, Katrina is a strong enough stride that it can become its own win condition. So you do not always have to resolve Cecilia versus rewrite to win the game. Make sure you play adaptively, especially against decks that have interruption. The second card that we're going to be running in our Great Tree lineup is going to be 2 of the normal Cecilia, or the White Lily Musketeer Cecilia. The effect of this card never actually comes up. I only run this card for the Musketeer and the Cecilia name. If you have the option to write this card or the reverse, most of the time you want to write this one. And that's because you want to discard Cecilia Reverse for Stride. Why? Because Neo-Nectar has cards that recycle cards from the drop zone, and you mainly want the Cecilia Reverses to be in your deck. Alternatively, you can replace this card with any other Great Tree Musketeer, like Martina for example, if you're not planning to do the additional rewrite combo. Next up, we have 2 of the Rotting Usurp Dragons. And this card is what makes the Cecilia Reverse combos really good, since it gives you a body on the board and an additional rearguard swing every time you play something on the Vanguard circle. This includes striding and rewriting Cecilia Reverse, of course. And I initially ran 3 of this card, but with the Katrina combo, we now actually have a way to almost always guarantee having the Rotting Usurp Dragon in the drop zone during the combo itself. And that is all for my Great Trees. Alright, next up, let's talk about the Great 2s. So my Great 2 lineup is a little bit unique. I'm seeing a lot more Musketeer-centric builds running a lot more Musketeer cards that cycle to consistently do Cecilia Reverse combos. But like I mentioned before, Cecilia Reverse is not this deck's only win condition. I built this Great 2 lineup to focus on Great 2 gaming, since most of the time you really do not want to ride up and give your opponent first stride because your ride up is really bad. So most of my Great 2s and Great 1s are built for token aggro to stay on your Great 2. First off, we're gonna have 4 of Maiden of Nepenthes. I don't see people run this card a lot. What it does is that on Vanguard and on Rearguard, it retires a token to draw 1, give itself plus 5k, and give itself a boost. This card is really good for Great 2 gaming, because this deck generates a lot of tokens in the early game, and this card converts those tokens into draws and huge power gains in the early game. And so, a column of this card behind a token after using its effect makes a 20k column, which hits over a damage trigger as well as heal guardians. This card also helps you cycle through your cards, which helps you get more token generators that feed this card. I highly prioritize getting at least one of this card in my hand for my mulligans. Next up, we have 3 of the Blossoming Maiden Sella. This card is a pretty good right target, and it has 2 uses. Firstly, on Vanguard and on Rearguard, it has an act ability where you can counterblast 1 to get 2 tokens. This is not once per turn. And so this is primarily used to support Maiden of Nepenthes, but you can also use this counterblast to fill your board with tokens during your Katrina turns, if you happen to not have enough tokens. This deck does not really mind using counterblast, since Katrina doesn't use counterblast, and you have a ton of ways to countercharge anyway. Secondly, on the Rearguard circle, this card gains a continuous plus 5k and cannot be retired if you have a Rearguard with the same name as your Vanguard. And so this makes another 20k column with a plant token, which is again really good for going aggro in your grade 2 game. Next up, we have 3 Pansy Musketeer Sylvia. This is a simple token generator. It's good for grade 2 gaming, also very good on your Katrina turns. Additionally, this card, along with your other auto token generators, are your main plays against Link Joker. Because during your Katrina turns, what you can do is you can call this card on the Katrina swing, and you call a token over this card, which retires this card. So remember, tokens are removed from play when locked, so it leaves you with unlocked Rearguard circles. Lastly, for the grade 2, we have 2 of the Licorice Musketeer Saul. This card is a utility card, and it's one of your only cards in your main deck that's Soul Blessed. During your turn, Saul helps you search or reach for your other grade 2 combo pieces for grade 2 gaming if you don't already have them on the board. Which means, for example, if you don't have the Maiden of Nepenthes, for example, you can haul this card to sort of potentially get the Maiden of Nepenthes from your top 3. Also, this card lets you use his Counterblast skill when calling a trigger. And so you can use this card defensively on your opponent's turn in combination with Rain Breath Dragon. The amount of times that I called this card on my opponent's turn and got a heal or an over trigger is hilarious. Do note that it only activates the trigger effect, not the additional effect for over triggers. I also use this card in my Cecilia combo in my Katrina turn to ensure that Rotting Usurp Dragon gets sent to the drop zone, since the cost to activate this card's effect is to Soul Blast 1 and retire one of your Rearguards. That is all for my grade 2s. Now let's talk about the grade 1s. As I mentioned before, my grade 1 and my grade 2 lineup is made for grade 2 gaming. So first and foremost, let's talk about 4 of the Maiden of Flower Carpet. So Maiden of Flower Carpet is mainly used as a token generator, but its secondary effect is also pretty decent when playing versus decks that interrupt your Cecilia combo. I run this card over the V Sweetberry because the V Maiden of Sweetberry has a mandatory soul charge effect when your Vanguard is grade 3 or higher. And this deck does not need soul at all. Granted, the V Sweetberry has an advantage of being a 13k beater or booster, which is something for you to consider as well. Next, we have 4 of the Water Lily Musketeer, Ruth. So this card has 2 uses. Firstly, it's the best right target going second, because it summons 2 tokens if your opponent's at grade 1. Secondly, it's a counter charge, which is very easy to set up. The only downside is that Ruth is not a token generator on Rearguard Circle. I'm partly considering running a 2-2 split of this and the V Sweetberry. But you gotta consider how useful this card is going second, because it provides an additional attack for free on grade 1 going second. Next up, we have 2 of the Valkyrie of Reclamation Padmini. So Padmini is a grade 3 searcher, and I initially was considering replacing this card for more rearguard token generators. But upon playtesting a lot, I found that Padmini is actually very, very useful, and Padmini does so much for the deck early game, besides just searching for your grade 3 right target. First, it helps you set up your combos with Rotting Usurp Dragon. Since Rotting Usurp Dragon is grade 3, and Padmini can immediately discard the Rotting Assert Dragon. Secondly, it also helps you search for your heal guards, which is super duper important in this deck since you primarily want to grade 2 game, and so you're staying in grade 2 while your opponent's probably gonna ride out. And thirdly, it's a 13k beater or booster when you have 2 or more plant tokens. And so this makes a 18k column on turn 1 with a token, or a 21k or a 23k column with a grade 1 or grade 2 for your turn 2 forward. And so it just has so much utility from just this one card alone. But of course you're only running 2 because you don't need any more grade searchers in that. And so the other 2 cards that I run for my grade 1s are the Maiden of Sweetberry, G Maiden of Sweetberry, the original one, and one of the Light Elemental Homilies. So first let's talk about the G Sweetberry. So this card is run as the one-off for a slower Ladislava combo with Honolly. This is just to allow you to do the Cecilia combo. And this only happens basically when you don't have enough tokens for your Katrina combo. And so this card allows you to combo in a rare case that you also have to use Inverno, for example, to cycle your Cecilia Verse if you really want to do the Cecilia Verse combo. However, this is not a mandatory card. You can also consider other utility cards such as Urgula, which protects your Cecilia Verse from interruption. Or you can just run more token generators. Next, we also run one of the Honolies, and so this card is searchable by both Ladislava and Katrina, and so you can use this card to slow the pace of the game. And what's really cool about this card is that you can lock this card in the middle of your Cecilia Reverse combo. So this lets you attack more than 5 times during that turn using your rear guards, and then unlocking it at the end of your turn to interrupt your opponent. And so this card combos with Ladislava, it combos with Katrina as well, but its combo with Ladislava gets so much better post-History Collection, because you can call it immediately and immediately activate its act ability. And lastly, for our grade 1, we run the Elementaria Sanctitude. This is a really busted perfect guard that guards you from basically any guard restricts. It also, you know, it's just a really OP card because it's a Blitz Order, not a unit. So it doesn't count itself as placing it on a Guardian Circle when you guard with it. And last but not least, we run the V starter because it's basically the best starter for this deck. And that is all for my units and Blitz orders. Next up, let's talk about the triggers. This deck needs multiple pieces to have a very strong grade 2 game. So my lineup is 6 crits, 5 draws, 4 heals, and 1 over trigger. So let's talk about these. First and foremost, I run 3 of the Stride crits. You only need 3 because you run 8 Gree Trees in the main deck, which you really want to discard for Stride anyway. And then we have 2 of the Alains. Alain is a countercharge 2 when being called from the deck using a Musketeer ability. So this card you can use in your Katrina combo to allow you to do your Cecilia combo, which only needs 2 counterblasts for the full Cecilia Reverse combo. And so this is just perfect since the countercharge is 2. And additionally, I also run 1 of the Crit Sentinels. I personally like a diverse set of Sentinels in the main deck since it allows you to guard more efficiently when it comes up. Next, for the draw triggers, we run 2 of the draw PGs, which is, well, it's just the best kind of PG overall, so most of the time. And then we also run off the 10k shield draws. So these are the D 10k shield draws. So this card will definitely be replaced by the new History Collection crits, which lets you draw if it's damage checked. But at the moment, I like the deck having a strong draw power more than having crit pressure. But the new crits will definitely be a good card to replace these with, since it has better shield, provides some draw, and lets you have more crit pressure at the same time. And of course, we have the 4 Heal Guardians. There's no need for any other types of heal triggers because you don't really need to do any counter charging or soul charging in other forms other than the lanes. And just the heal guards are just really good for you to protect yourself during your grade 2 games, and it's also searchable with Padmini and Ladislava. So these cards are just super duper good. And last but not least, we have the Blast Favor, which I believe is like one of the most multi-purpose over triggers. I'm not really sure if this is going to be replaced by like the new Cray Elemental that lets you swing with your rearguard twice. I think this card is still probably better because it just does so many things in so many conditions of the game. So this is just better. And so this is my trigger lineup. Now let's talk about the G units. Firstly, we're running 3 of the green Katrina. This is probably the most busted card in the game in general. It gives you massive numbers, it sets up any combo you want, it scales incredibly well, and it lets you adapt to almost any situation based on how you build the deck, of course. And in general, you'd probably win with this deck on your second stride, but you can definitely do it much quicker if you properly play the early game, and you pressure your opponent enough. And you rarely ever need to go to your third Katrina, unless you're playing versus like a control deck or something. If you think that you'll be playing against a lot of control decks in general, you are free to run 4 of these cards, but at the moment 3 is good enough for me. Next, we run the unflipped target, which is the Cyclone. Cyclone gives you plus 5k to all of your token units. Well, not token units specifically, but your tokens get plus 5k for every Cyclone open in the G zone. And so this just basically makes big numbers bigger. I would probably bump this up to 3 since I'm running 3 Katrinas, but 2 is still okay so far. So yeah. Next, we run one of the Ladislava. This is run basically only for the case that you do not have enough tokens for your Katrina combo on your first stride. You normally need about 3 tokens to do a full combo with Katrina. You can use Ladislava to set up for your next turn by summoning Honolly or by setting up G-Guards while you are still doing your Cecilia reverse combos with Ladislava. This card gets much better post-history collection since Honolly will have an act ability and it will not require you to counter blast at all. Next up, we run 2 of the Virginal Cecilia. This is your G unit Cecilia, and this card is only run for the specific case where you want to go for a Cecilia reverse combo, but you misride your grade 3 and end up with a Vanguard that is not a Musketeer. You can replace this card with any other G units, but this card is ran just for that rare situation. Just in case that rare situation happens. Although it's a losing situation if that does happen anyway. Next up, we're going to be running one of the Invernos. So the Inverno is also ran for a specific situation where you no longer have Cecilia reverse in your main deck. You can use this card alongside G Sweet Berry to still do the Cecilia reverse combo. Alternatively, you can just go for a token Katrina combo, of course. But this is just in case you really want to do that Cecilia reverse combo. And we also run one of the Megaloma. You don't really need this card, but you never know when this card can become useful when you're about to lose the game. And of course, you have to remember that Megaloma gives you a free stride for your next turn, which helps you set up a free Katrina for your next turn. Which is pretty insane because Katrina really does not need any other cards on the board, because Katrina can basically give you a massive comeback. It scales really well. And lastly, for our G units, for our strides, we run one of the Zoa. And so this is the only play I can think of when you're playing against bugs. Honestly, that matchup is so doomed. I have no idea how to properly win that, aside from just probably cheesing a win using Zoa. Who knows, maybe you can cheese a win with this card, or if you cannot finish them off with an early aggro or a first stride Katrina. This is the only way I can think of. So that is all for the strides. And now for the G-Guards, we run 5. We run 2 Antero. Antero is a 35k shield if you have 4 or more rear guards or 1 or less rear guard, which happens a lot. It also helps you Soul Blast, so you can Soul Blast out your Cecilia versus to cycle it back again. And you basically cycle back using this card. This is Robertina. Robertina allows you to shuffle up to 2 cards with the same name, and if you do, she gives herself plus 15k shield and countercharge 1. This is mainly used to reset your Cecilia versus back into the main deck. And last but not least, of course, we run one of the Rain Breath Dragon. This is one of my favorite cards to play alongside Saul during my opponent's turn. It is a pretty interesting way to disrupt your opponent's plans using Saul's trigger ability. And that is basically all for the G units. So now let's talk about the general game plan of this deck, as well as some matchups that this deck struggle against. So first and foremost, as I mentioned before, this deck has a really terrible write-up. So what you want to do is you want to be able to set up your grade 2 gaming. And so you want to be able to summon as much tokens as possible in the early game to be able to pressure your opponent early and have ways to gain value during your grade 2 gaming. So you will be able to achieve this really easily using Sela and using Maiden of Nepenthes. So these are two core cards that you kind of want to have all the time in your early game. Priority to you have to prioritize getting the Maiden of Nepenthes, and then the rest of the token generators is to support the Maiden of Nepenthes. So using Maiden of Nepenthes in Sela, you can get 20k columns really easily and really consistently on your rear guards, which is really great because your attack pattern will probably be a 15k Vanguard with two 20k rear guards, and that will continuously force your opponent to chip away from their hand and force them to basically either get a lot of damage early game or lose cards in their hand as much as possible. So obviously that game plan is not always going to be how you want to play the game. For example, if you are playing against Link Joker or decks that can retire a lot of your units, you probably want to just stick with using your tokens to beat over your opponent instead of having actual units on your rearguard circles. And aside from that, a general matchup that this deck really struggles against are decks that can write down. For example, Thavas or Steam Maidens, Chronojet, etc. So those kinds of decks unfortunately gain a lot of value by writing up and then down again, and they can generate markers consistently while this deck cannot do write downs. And unfortunately what that means is that this deck will have to remain on the grade 2 while your opponent gains that value, because you really don't want to give your opponent first stride anyway. So you generally want to attempt to try your best to pressure your opponent as much as possible and force them to ride up, and then you want to transition to the mid game where you will start striding. Moving on to the mid game to late game, your primary win condition was going to be the Green Katrina with Cecilia Reverse. And as I mentioned before, the Cecilia Reverse will not be a very consistent win condition, especially against decks that have really good interruption. For example, like Kagero, Narukami, also, for example, Steam Maidens. They all have ways to interrupt your board during your turn. Some of them have ways to kill your Cecilia Reverse, which really sucks. And so, because of that, as I mentioned before as well, your Green Katrina is a win condition on its own as well. What you want to do against decks that can interrupt your Cecilia is you want to ignore the Cecilia entirely and focus on summoning your plant tokens using the token generators. Green Katrina unfortunately does not have the best hand size as compared to when you want to do the Cecilia combo, but having the plant tokens gain so much power to the Green Katrina is good enough for you to win the game. So against decks that do not interrupt, go for the Cecilia play. Against decks that with interrupt or heavy control decks, go for the token generator play. Alright, now let's talk about some basic combos. Firstly, I want to talk about the simple Katrina and Cecilia Reverse combo with no Rotting Usurp Dragons in the graveyard. So in order for you to do this combo, you actually need 2 tokens before your Katrina. So you want to have 3 tokens in total later with your Katrina. So let's say we stride into Katrina, we unflip the Cyclone, and Katrina's skill will summon us a token. So what you want to do here is you want to have a column with a back row that is still standing. And so all of your tokens right now have plus 15k. So first you swing with one of your tokens here, leaving the back row standing. And sorry, this is actually supposed to be this way. And then you swing with this one. And then next, we swing with our Vanguard, and we get to call up to 3 units from the deck. So what we want to call is we are gonna call the Cecilia Reverse, the Rotting Usurp Dragon, and here is where you can diverge. You can either go for a Sol or any plant token generator. For example, Sylvia, say. So either way, what's gonna happen is that you want the Rotting Usurp Dragon to be retired, so in the case of Sylvia, you're going to use her skill to call a token over the Rotting Usurp Dragon. This is supposed to be here in drop zone. And then you perform your triple drive here. 1, 2, 3, right? And then next, you're going to be swinging with your Cecilia Reverse. You can either hold off on the boost or not, it's up to you. You could probably boost here to get the value of your Green Katrina. Then you're going to use your Cecilia Reverse. Let's say you have 2 counterblasts here, say. Counterblast 1, you lock 2 of your standing units here, and you rewrite Cecilia Reverse. Upon rewrite, first you get another Force 1. I stack mostly all of my Force 1s in one area, and that would activate the ability of your Rotting Usurp Dragon. Since you placed a grade 3, you're gonna call it Rotting Usurp Dragon. Then you're gonna swing with your Rotting Usurp, and you're gonna be swinging. Now, right now, this is only a 10k, so this is a 23k, so it still hits over a damage trigger. You swing with this, and with her skill, Counterblast 1, you're gonna retire these two to search top 5 for an additional 2 units to call. So this can be anything, so it basically gives you an additional attack with your rear guard. So that is the most basic combo that you want to do with the Cecilia. This will obviously give you a drive check, so you will at least have 5 cards extra in your hand. This is a really, really good and simple combo to remember. Next, we're going to be doing a similar combo, but this time we already have the Rotting Usurp Dragon in the graveyard. So the only difference here is just the utility that you can have with this. So once again, the same thing. Get yourself a punt token, and you're going to be doing the same attack pattern. This time you can actually do it this way. You can swing with your back row as well. 1, 2. Now from here, swing with your Vanguard, and skill, you get to summon 3 units again. So this time we're going to be summoning 1 Elaine, 1 Honolly, and this what's really cool about this combo is that you can work with even no counterblasts open right now. So for example, you have it this way. Now you can activate the trigger effects step by step, so you can do it one by one. So you can first activate the Honolly's effect, which will force you to counterblast 1. And then afterwards you want to play the Elaine's effect, which will countercharge 2. So this opens up your countercharges. And so this is another triple drive, 1, 2, and 3. And then you want to swing with your Cecilia, skill, counterblast 1, lock these 2. And so this is really cool because now this is your 4th attack, but you're locking your Honolly, right? So now you're free to swing more again with your rear guards, like so. Skill of Rotting Usurp, since it's already in the graveyard, you get to call it, swing, and swing again with her skill, counterblast, retire, call, etc, etc. So pretty cool utility. You get again plus 5 cards in your hand this turn, which is pretty cool. And yeah, that is the 2 most simple combos that you can go for. And that is all for my Neo-Nectar Premium Cecilia Reverse deck profile. I hope that you guys enjoyed the video. And if you guys have any suggestions on how we can run this deck better, please leave it in the comment section. I would also want to know if there are any Neo-Nectar players out there who knows a way to play against Mega Colony, because really that matchup is really, really doomed for this deck. But aside from that, I hope that you guys get to try out this deck and enjoy this playstyle, because I've been having so much fun playing it. Thank you for watching!